Hello all, this is ReFantazio's. I've been playing Metaphor ReFantazio lately. It's a really long game, so I haven't finished it yet. I'm not prepared to do a review. But I do want to talk about it, because I have gotten a decent way into it, and the game has shown me a very big reveal. And having seen the plot twist, I have the great need to talk about it, to gush about it, to discuss it. For two reasons. Number one, it's a super cool twist. Number two, most Persona fans, most Shin Megami Tensei fans, and most fans of Atlus in general will not understand the significance of this twist because they likely don't have the proper context to understand why it's so cool. So in this video I'm going to provide that context, and I will explain why I think it's so cool, while poorly containing my excitement. Obviously I'll be discussing spoilers for Metaphor, so consider this your spoiler warning if you don't want to see it. Alright, we need to discuss Etrian Odyssey. Etrian Odyssey is my favorite game series from Atlus. It is a first-person, turn-based JRPG dungeon crawler. The games were originally released for the DS and the 3DS, and their central gimmick is that while you're crawling through these dungeons, you actually have to draw the map yourself, using your stylus on the bottom screen. In Etrian Odyssey 1, the premise is that you are an adventurer's guild, compelled by the promise of fame and riches to explore the Yggdrasil Labyrinth, a sprawling, descending forest near the town of Etria. The town's prosperity comes from the exploration of the forest, and acts as a hub for explorer guilds, including your own. For most of the game, Etrian Odyssey's story is very basic. You exist in a generic medieval fantasy world. But as you proceed down the various floors and different stratums, strange things begin to happen. You discover a race of people that live inside the forest. The leadership of the town, which at first was very happy to have you exploring, now occasionally makes moves to bar your way. And this all comes to a head when you get to the 5th stratum. For context, a stratum in Etrian Odyssey consists of several floors, and each stratum has a distinct and different biome. The first 4 stratums are a forest, a jungle, a rainforest, a desert. And so it comes as quite a shock when you get to the 5th stratum, where it turns out that you are not exploring yet another natural environment, but instead find yourself in a skyscraper in Shinjuku. You are not in a medieval fantasy game, you are in post-apocalypse Japan. This revelation is just kind of thrust on you, and accompanying it is this sweeping music that's perfect for contemplating the revelation. It's a great moment and a great reveal. Nowadays it's fairly common for your fantasy RPGs to reveal that they're actually in post-apocalyptic Earth. Xenoblade, Nier, Shin Megami Tensei 4. But Etrian Odyssey came out in 2007. I'm pretty sure that the trope wasn't as common back then, and as a result would have had a bigger effect. Now here's the thing, I didn't play the original Etrian Odyssey. What I played was Etrian Odyssey Untold, a remake of the first game that introduced the graphics and gameplay conventions innovated in Etrian Odyssey 4 back to the first 2 games. The Untold versions also had a story mode that you could play instead of the classic mode. In the story mode, you would play as set characters with predefined classes. It included cutscenes and gave personalities to the characters and had them talk and interact with each other, whereas normal Etrian Odyssey would just have generic default characters that are in your guild. The story version also changed how some events played out, elaborated on different characters' motivations further, and better explained the setting. In my opinion, the remake is better than the original in almost every way. It has better gameplay, better build making, better map design. And if you don't like the Untold story or characters, you can still choose to play the classic mode and play with all these new improvements, while also keeping the older story. However, I do think that Untold fumbles in one specific aspect, and that's if you don't play the classic mode and choose to play the story version, it spoils the revelation that you're in post-apocalyptic Earth, and it does it right away, like from the beginning. It might be that they expected people to be aware of it already and so didn't want to try and replicate it, or maybe it was that by the time the Untold version came out, the trope was so common they didn't see the need to try and do it again. Whatever the reason, the result is that if you played Untold, like I did, and you played the story mode, like I did, you did not get to have that cool moment when you walk into Shinjuku and are just shocked by what you see. And that brings us back to Metaphor ReFantazio. Imagine what it was like for me to be just playing this new Atlus IP, just enjoying the story, doing the Virga Island questline, going to the dungeon, oblivious to the profundities I was about to witness. And as I'm descending down into this dungeon, what happens? I go downward, and I find myself in Lost Shinjuku again. This time not confined to what it would look like in 3DS hardware, completely reimagined in Metaphor's style. And then that same classic sweeping song starts playing at me. Not just playing at me. It hit me. It came at me. I was attacked by that song. The reason that this is so surprising is because this isn't just a situation where they pulled the same trick again. You're not just in a fantasy world and it happens to be post-apocalyptic Japan. That's not the twist. That wouldn't be much of a twist. I would not have been surprised at all. The twist is not only are you in post-apocalyptic Japan, you are in Etrian Odyssey's setting. You are in Etrian Odyssey's setting of post-apocalyptic Japan. Metaphor is a prequel to Etrian Odyssey. And for me, as a big fan of Etrian Odyssey, that was more shocking than anything else they could have done. Finding out that the fantasy world takes place in the future is these days not at all surprising. Finding out that this highly celebrated new IP from Atlas that's selling well is actually connected directly to Etrian Odyssey, and seeing Lost Shinjuku modeled in 3D with my own eyeballs, that's shocking. That's the kind of thing that leaves your mouth agape. And it ended up giving me that moment of revelation that I didn't get the first time because I played the Untold version. I didn't get that moment where you're shocked to see Shinjuku. But now, I have finally gotten that experience that the original Etrian Odyssey players had. It was wonderful. The map of the area is exactly the same. It mirrors the Lost Shinjuku map of Etrian Odyssey. And that's true for every floor. Plus, the floors are named the same thing in both maps. Also, in Etrian Odyssey they have these things called FOEs. For the most part, Etrian Odyssey has random battles. But apart from the random battles, there are especially challenging monsters that appear and move on the map as you're exploring. FOEs move in different ways depending on what it is. They will sometimes go in a set pattern, sometimes they'll chase you in specific ways, sometimes they'll be able to move 2 spaces at once. The thing with FOEs is that they move when you move. So they're a kind of navigational puzzle that you're encouraged to avoid at least the first time, because most of the time, the first time you see a foe, it'll be too strong for you to reasonably beat. I was absolutely delighted to find that even in a new IP, FOE. The map is full of Etrian Odyssey references. In places where there were resource nodes in Etrian Odyssey, there are items. Many of the sellable loot that you get have parallels with the loot that you could get in Etrian Odyssey. Sometimes they're just called the same thing. When you finally clear the dungeon, beat the boss, and go back to town after everything's settled, the chief decides to name the town after the dragon Et, settling on the name Etria. In fact, the cheeky bastards at Atlas had him say this: "One day after years untold, I hope Etria will be a bustling town. People from far and wide will meet here. It will be worthy of its name. At least that is my fantasy." A pertinent detail here is that before Metaphor was called Metaphor, it was promoted as Project ReFantazio. So it's just very on the nose. Etria, Untold, ReFantazio. I cannot believe that they would do this. I still can't believe it. Because you have to understand, nobody plays Etrian Odyssey. There's probably like 18 Etrian Odyssey fans, and they're all in the comment section to this video. Metaphor, on the other hand, is very popular. It's reviewed extremely well, among the highest reviewed games this year. I understand that it sold very well. So I never would have predicted that they would tie it so closely to Etrian Odyssey. I'm not complaining, I'm just stunned. And so now we need to talk about the implications. We need to talk about the lore of what's happening here. What does this mean for the lore of Etrian Odyssey and for Metaphor? The lore of Etrian Odyssey is that in the past there was an apocalypse. It's never detailed exactly what happened, but what we do know is that it had something to do with pollution. There was some kind of miasma that made the Earth uninhabitable for humans. And so scientists initiated the Yggdrasil project. They planted Yggdrasil trees across the Earth, and as the trees grew, they would absorb the pollution from the planet, which would eventually clean the environment. However, it was known that eventually the Yggdrasil core would absorb so much pollution that it would go berserk. The cores would be a catastrophe, unkillable through normal means, and would end up unleashing the pollution that they had absorbed back out into the environment, anywhere that they went. Because of this, the projects also included failsafes. In Etrian Odyssey Untold, there was a facility with a weapon of mass destruction that would be used on the core. I believe that facility is in Metaphor. One of the scenic locations you can visit on your Gauntlet Runner is Sporico Cave, which looks a lot like Glatzheim, especially with the currents of ancient technology running through the walls, which I think we can take to mean the Untold version of events are canon. Now, in Metaphor in Shinjuku, there are places where you can find notes that talk about what happened in the past. And one of those notes reads as follows: "The discovery of Magla, the era of science came to an end. But despite all its glory, Magla was the author of our destruction. The world was destroyed." So, when Magla was discovered, magic was incorporated into the civilization. That's why the divine relics still use Magla, they're not just simple technology. In one of the murals depicting the war that caused the ruin, it showed that the old people could control gods and dragons and attack each other with them, which is what led to the calamity. In a different note, it reads the following: "Sky sundering wings, ground aflame, sweeping hellfire, the capital falls. The city is enveloped by Magla. We should not have surrendered ourselves to fear." So, Magla and its effects are influenced by human anxiety, emotions. The city is destroyed, enveloped by Magla. It pollutes the city. In other places, Magla is described as a pollutant. When you talk with Neuros about how Luis's airship can fly, he mentions that running a Skyrunner that way pollutes the environment. And with all of this information, we understand now what the writers did. They have retconned the Etrian Odyssey pollution that caused the apocalypse to be Magla. And a great deal of thought was put into this, because it was never explained or made sense why the Yggdrasil cores would come alive and go berserk if they absorbed all of the pollution. But that's exactly the kind of thing we would expect to happen if that pollution was Magla. It makes perfect sense. We have deftly joined together these two series. We are in the Etrian Odyssey universe, and I really hope this means that they have not given up on making an Etrian Odyssey 6, they haven't abandoned the series. Please, Atlas, let this be a sign that you're going to keep going. And that's the end of this video. As always, thank you very much for watching.